Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
What's the most paranormal event that occurred to you during your childhood? For me, it was seeing a shadow person in my bedroom at night.
When I was a little kid, I remember having a bad fever. And at one point, some man asks me how I'm feeling and tries to cheer me up. I didn't recognize him, but I was sure it's my dad, and I'm just dumb for not recognizing him. When I woke up, I asked Mom if Dad was here, and she told me no one was home other than me and her.
I had an out of, or maybe in, body experience when I was around 7 or 8. It was a really beautiful day. The sky was my favorite shade of blue. Not a cloud was to be seen in the sky. Summer was in full flow, and the green in the leaves of the trees around me were akin to emeralds. Birds soared and sang. I took the deepest breath I could and thanked God for this moment. Then I closed my eyes and sighed, and then I felt myself get sucked out of my body. I experienced eternity. I felt all there was to feel, saw all there was to see, knew all there was to know. God gave me the answer to existence. Then I was pulled back. I felt a rushing. It had only been a moment or so on the outside, but I had lived eternity internally. When I came round, I felt as though I'd been punched in the nose full force, and I was sad, heartbroken, for God had given me the answer and I so clumsily dropped it. So I dedicated the rest of my life to the pursuit of the knowledge of God and the truth of existence.
I was like 5 or 6, can't recall really. I was usually staying throughout summer holidays at my grandparents' house in the countryside where my uncle lived too. During one night, I woke up to the feeling of terror and heard some rumblings outside. Didn't know what was going on, but the feel of dread was setting in hard. Suddenly light switches on and Uncle walks in, notices that I'm up. Looks curious and asks if I've heard anything. I confirm. He then walks out of the room and goes outside. After a couple of minutes, he comes back and asks what I've heard. I've answered that it sounded like some chains being pulled around the front of the home and some knocking on the window. He sits on my bed and explains that I'll be hearing such weird noises from time to time, and that I need not to be afraid since nothing can hurt me physically. And if I feel the overwhelming dread, I should just sing to myself. He even got to the detail that if I was unable to speak, I should sing or pray in my mind.
When I was 5 years old, I had a dream that occurred as if I awoke from sleeping. My room looked completely normal and nothing seemed off. I then heard scratching at my closet right next to my bed. When I investigated, my mom came out from the closet with her hair wild. She had blood all over her nightgown, and had metal coat hangers jammed into her fingers and straightened out as claws. I woke up terrified. I don't remember what I did after the dream, and I don't remember what occurred before it, but I'll never forget that.
We lived in a woods when I was a kid. There are more houses there now, but back then, our nearest neighbors were 2 miles away. My dad went out of town on a business trip for a couple of days, and Mom, clearly a little freaked out to be so alone, had all the outside lights on, lighting up the yard like a football stadium. We were sitting there watching TV when the dogs started going nuts. We looked out the back glass door, and they were in the back porch barking in the direction of the woods out at the edge of the property. It was weird. It was like these 2 big-ass German shepherds were afraid to leave the porch. Mom opened the back door a crack, and they turned to look at her and started whining and continued to bark out toward the woods. After a couple of minutes, they stopped, but still looked nervous as hell, whining and sort of pacing back and forth on the porch. Mom went to get the shotgun and told me to let one of the dogs, the good one, best dog we ever had, in the house. Quiet for a couple of hours. Then they both cut loose again, at precisely the same time. The one inside ran to the back door and stood up with his front paws against it, barking and snarling like crazy. This time, we could actually see something back a few yards from the tree line, something pale and very, very tall. This was in the days before cell phones, and one of the handsets was right there by the door. Mom picked it up in one hand and opened the back door. The dog bolted out, and being the brave one, tore out across the backyard, then stopped about midway and just stood there barking and growling. Mom shouted that she had a gun and was calling the police, hollow threat, that county police would be an hour getting out to us, then slammed the door. She told police dispatch that we had a trespasser, and I'll never forget the way she described it over the phone.
A trespasser, I think. Or some kind of large animal, maybe a bear.
A bear. Yeah, that was not what we were looking at. Unless somebody let their pet polar bear escape. Whatever it was very pale. You could tell it was white, just shaded by the tree branches and foliage. And while it was extremely tall, it wasn't massive like a bear. Gangly is the word that best describes it. It looked like a pale, lanky man, only taller than any man should be. All the barking, shouting, threats of guns and cops, that thing never moved. Just kept standing back there just beyond the reach of the floodlights, more lit by the moon through the trees. We sat there on the kitchen floor, Mom holding the gun across her lap, waiting for the cops to get there, and whispering about what we thought it was. At least I was. Mom didn't really want to think about it. While we waited, she tried to call Dad at the hotel, but he was out getting dinner with his boss and coworkers, East Coast to West Coast times. And while we watched, that thing seemed to turn, take no more than 2 steps, and just vanish. When the cops arrived, Mom glossed over the weirdness so they wouldn't think she was nuts, and they went out to look. We tagged along behind them. They didn't find anything, but we got a good gauge of how tall the thing was. Judging from the branches, it was somewhere between 8 to 9 feet tall. It was years before my mom let me play outside unsupervised. I complained about it to my dad once, and what he said scared me nearly as bad as that thing had that night.
Your mother's got it right. These woods are old, son, and you'd be a fool to think we know everything that calls them home. It ain't all bad, but never let yourself think it's all good. Or even natural.
When I first started learning about UFOs, we lived in the countryside. It was quiet, I heard a lot of house noises, and saw a lot of open sky, so I guess the prospect that we weren't alone wasn't difficult to grasp. Anyway, I would always sleep with my head under the covers cause the house noises scared me. I'm not ashamed, everybody does cringy shit as a kid. Well, one night I woke up. I might have had to pee, or maybe I was just waking up for no reason, but whatever it was, I sleepily opened my eyes because that's what you do when you wake up. Right there, inches from my face and tucked under my covers, was the head of a gray alien. Staring at me. I was laying on my side, so it would have been bent over my bed. I closed my eyes very hard and fast and pretended to sleep again. I was shitting my pants obviously, but I was like, now I must be dreaming. So I cracked my eyes open just enough to see. Nope. It was there and very real. I didn't know what to do. I just laid there. I was terrified. After maybe an hour I just rolled over so I didn't have to think about it staring at me. I don't think I slept anymore before I had to go to school. I always wrote this off as a night terror, but it only ever happened once. I never had consistent problems with it. I question whether it was real or not even now.
When I was maybe 8 or 9, I had a dream where I was looking at nuclear tests in some military area. I'd watched the Nevada atom bomb videos on a TV documentary prior to that, and it left an impression, until some grunt came and told me I wasn't supposed to be there and that I should leave. I didn't, so when he came back he started chasing me, so naturally I panicked and ran as fast as I could. Here's the weird part. The phone started ringing at home, which eventually woke me up. I was going to ignore it and go back to sleep, but it kept ringing for the longest time, so I picked it up, and on the other line I heard the voice of the same grunt who'd told me to leave in my dream, and he said, "I got you now, we're coming." I got absolutely terrified and I hid in a closet for around 3 hours until my mother came home from work. I still have no idea what happened that day, but no one ever came.
I had a near-death experience when I was 5. I fell from a height of 3 meters and hit my face on a flower pot, which is probably what saved me, because otherwise, I would have hit the hard floor and bust my head open. I remember lying there soaked in blood. Everything around me was completely dark. I couldn't see anything except for an open passage right in front of me, framed like a door. From the door came a strong white light. I couldn't see past it. A man stepped through it, picked me up, and carried me through the door. Just as I crossed the wall of light, I saw vast flowery fields. And that's where the memory ends. I guess I fainted immediately.
B10. Spend most my days outside fucking around with my best friend, also 10. Starting to get dark, we're walking home along a tall as fuck concrete wall which has a ghetto rugby stadium on the other side. We clock onto some man in his late 20s walking the same direction as us, on the opposite side of the pavement. Something isn't right about him, we both realize without saying anything. He's walking faster and more erratically towards us. We start power walking to keep our distance. As soon as he notices, this guy starts fucking sprinting towards us. Flight kicks in immediately, we sprint too. White van pulls up from around the corner and tries to block us from passing by, parking horizontally. Quite a narrow street. I said before that the wall to our left was high as fuck, but there happens to be an instance where it dips just low enough that you can climb over. Fortunately, it appears at just the right time. We help each other over the wall, run down onto the rugby pitch by climbing down the ghetto concrete rugby stadium. Guy follows us over the wall but doesn't give chase. Just watches us and goes back over the wall. I don't know if he was trying to cut us off again or just left at that point, because we happen to know the area really well and just cut through some forest and a council estate to get back home using an alternate route. We went back to my friend's house and told his dad, who flipped his shit. I didn't realize until a few years ago that he was a big name in the drug scene, and we were both kept from going out without a guardian for a couple of months. We didn't realize what was going on at the time and our parents kept us in the dark. We just thought some guys wanted to beat us up or something. Then one day, it just clicks.
My granddad said he met the devil once. Ireland 1920s. My granddad walking home with his bike from a job dropping off bread to people's houses. Meets a man walking on the country road. He starts talking to him. The man looks normal, quite smart, but has creepy eyes, black irises. Said they looked evil. The man asks if he goes to school. Does he say his prayers? Granddad says he does, and the man laughs. Granddad is getting weirded out now. The man pulls out a pipe and smokes it. Didn't light it, but it flares to life. The man says he's got to go now and heads off down a crossroad they arrive at. Says he's an appointment to keep. Man vanishes when Granddad goes to look for him again. Hears an almighty cackle coming from all around him. Rushes home, terrified. His father asks if he saw a wolf while out. Apparently villagers saw a wolf chase some sheep and it killed a man who tried to chase it off.
Be me, idiot kid. Body's fucked up, so have surgery to unfuck it. Pain medicine causes me to hallucinate. Teacher asks what's wrong anon. Tell her I'm seeing and hearing shit that isn't there, say I think they're demons. US smack dab in the middle of the Satan panic, teacher freaks out. School freaks out. Parents freak out. Psychiatrist freaks out. Locked in a mental hospital at 6 years old. Doctor in charge has a few sessions, suddenly convinced I'm psychic. Takes me to rooms in the hospital and asks me to explain what I see and what happened in the room. Asks what symbols are on the cards he holds. Asks me to draw the first thing that comes to mind when he says a phrase or sentence. Compares results to different medications over my stay, tries to see which has the most impact. Lots of blank spots in memory from the various drug cocktails. Does daily tests and studies, usually the above listed sometimes different activities from what I can remember. Tells parents I'm a catalyst to the paranormal. Convinces them I'll be a constant danger and threat to their safety. After 11 months, insurance refuses to pay any more for the mental hospital. Doctor offers to pay for additional care, says his research funding will cover it no problem. Parents refuse, went 11 months without their crazy kid. Discharged. No medicine prescribed since doctor wanted to see if I could harness the power and control it. Pills eventually leave my system. Weeks pass. Nothing happens. Months pass. Nothing happens. Years pass. Nothing happens. It was all an unfortunate misunderstanding. The drugs caused me to see and hear shit. The test results were just sheer coincidence and extreme bell curve action, and it was all blown up due to everyone being obsessed with Satan and cults at the time. Not the best memories.
I'm a bit late, but why not? I'm the one who told the story about almost getting tickled by a kid named Christopher last thread. This story is roughly from around the same time. Be me, 8 or 9 years old, sitting in the backseat of my mom's car. Returning home from a weekend trip to Cali. I live in Las Vegas, and we were still about an hour outside the city if I recall correctly. Brother is to my left. Grandma is to my right. It's probably about 11 p.m. But in all honesty I couldn't tell you. Just know it's pretty late. Looking out the window at the mountains, can barely make out their silhouettes in the dark. All of a sudden, see what looks like a star start moving around above them. It flies around in a really bizarre way. Wouldn't have been able to explain it at the time, but imagine pointing a laser pointer at a wall and moving it around. All of a sudden another one appears. Both my grandma and my brother are awake, as are my parents in the front of the car. But, forgive me for how this sounds, for some unexplainable reason, I'm compelled not to bring their attention to what I'm seeing. Watch the objects for probably 30 seconds, before they both hover in the air for a split second, then disappear, one after the other. Literally just disappear. My face when. Fast forward a few months. In school, at the library. Looking for a book to read. See one of those, unexplained phenomena, books. There's a whole series of them on the shelf about Bigfoot, ghosts, etc. This particular book is about UFOs. Start reading it. Get to the part with real-life testimonies. One in particular catches my eye. My name is Jane Doe, and I'm a resident of Las Vegas, Nevada. One night about 20 years ago, I was driving home from out of state late at night, when I saw a floating, glowing object that didn't behave like a plane flying around above the mountains. Eventually it hovered in place for a second before just disappearing. Fast forward to just about half a year ago. Be really into the JRE podcast. Listening to the episode with Bob Lazar. He tells his entire story about working on UFOs on a remote site near Las Vegas in the 80s. He says they did their most complicated flight tests above the mountains every Wednesday night, as that was the least trafficked day of the week. Describes the way they move almost exactly the same as I saw and read so many years ago. I took the laser pointer description straight from him. I wouldn't call myself a UFO fanatic or anything, but the similarities of the two stories to my own really struck me. To this day I'm convinced that at the very least what I saw was not two planes. I really regret not pointing them out to anyone while I was seeing them, because now almost no one believes me.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.